Hello, welcome back to part two of my review of the Alpine Mormon, Utah Mormon Youth Rescue by Bradley Wilcox. Uh, this is part two for me, but on the website where I'm pulling this, it's actually part three, G is for the Godhead. So just wanted to make sure that that was designated and explained. I wanted to say welcome to those of you who have subscribed to my channel, and I wanted to say thank you for showing your interest in my video. And to those who commented on my previous video, if you're back, welcome back, and it's good to have you. I want to say that it's great to have people who are sharing this experience, and I just want everybody to know that you're welcome here and your voice is heard. I think that's the primary motivation for me making these videos. And so with that, I'll go ahead and dive into this.
G stands for Godhead. G stands for Godhead. Our view of the Godhead is very different than the view of many Christians. Most Christians.
So first of all, I think it's interesting to say Christians. I know that that is something that is always very different because of that distinction. There are many Christians who say that Mormons are not. And it's because of that difference, one of the fundamental being that Mormons believe in the three distinct persons of the Godhead being separate from each other versus what might be called mainstream Christianity, where they believe in the triune God. So it is definitely interesting to think about that distinction, whether you believe in the triune Godhead or the three personages Godhead.
Christians believe that God and Jesus are the same being, and that God/Jesus is a spirit. And we don't believe that. We know that God and Jesus are separate beings and that they have physical, tangible, perfected bodies.
Okay, so the main point, and something that has stuck out to me for a very long time, to say that we know that God and Jesus are separate. Using the phrase "I know" is something that I think is overused in the church. I don't have a problem with people saying I believe something, but to say I know indicates a great amount of certainty, which I don't trust. And the reasons for that is evidence and the fact that even throughout Mormonism's history, from the little bit that I've started to learn, having left the church, is that this is not even a doctrine that has been firmly established from the beginning of the church. My understanding about the Joseph Smith accounts is that, first of all, they weren't even fully disclosed until almost 10 years after the first vision was supposed to have occurred. The first vision was supposed to have occurred in 1820, but the first accounts of that vision were not given until 1832. And at least that is something that I have read. This is something that I definitely need to study more up on. But just having that, the fact or the idea that there was a significant gap between the event and the disclosure of that event kind of says to me, if this were so vital, why did it take so long to be known? And the fact that the church was established in 1830 and the first vision wasn't something that was disclosed until 1832, why the 2-year gap between the time the church was established and the first vision account was given? And according to some of the things I've heard and read, is that even the first vision account changes from telling to telling, whether it's Joseph seeing a spirit versus God and Jesus as separate beings. Those are things that evolved over time. And I know the common dispute is that, people don't always tell the same story. It's the exact same way. It's just a fundamental nature of humanity that we don't we're not robots, so we can't tell the story the same way every single time. There are still significant facts or points within the story that do change. Like, was God a spirit or was God two separate beings? Was it another account says that it was Moroni that appeared to him and not a spirit or God and Jesus. And so just reconciling those differences in the story are things that can be questioned and I think are not fully disclosed within the church.
Well, how do we know that? Well, we could turn to some scriptures that talk about it, but mostly we know it because of Joseph Smith. He saw them. That's what Jackson was playing about when he played that song. He saw them. Yeah, but maybe Joseph Smith lied. If you haven't heard that yet, you certainly will. Lots of people say, oh, he just made it all up. He just made up that story. But people who go there don't understand why we lie.
Did he just say people don't understand why he lied? So
because you certainly don't understand. He just made up that story. But people who go there don't understand why we lie.
People don't understand why we lie. Okay, let's see what comes of this.
Because you certainly don't lie in an effort to be found out. You don't tell your teacher, I didn't get my homework done because aliens beamed down and sucked it into the mother ship. No, your teacher's never going to believe that. So what do you tell? Well, not you, because you don't lie. But what do your friends?
To quote House, everybody lies.
Tell the teacher. Yeah, the dog ate my homework. Oh my gosh, my mom washed it in the washing machine. Oh, the one I hear at BYU where little children have signed an honor code is my printer broke.
Okay, so it's not a matter of whether or not it's a lie, but the degree of the lie. I'm still not sure where this is going.
Every time a paper is due, you have no idea how many broken printers fill Utah Valley. It's just an epidemic. Now, why?
Too soon, Brad. Too soon.
Why do they say that to me? Because it's something I might believe. Do you think Joseph Smith was that different? If he were lying, then he would have said what everybody wanted to hear.
No, people make up extraordinary lies. Especially religions. They say that God spoke to me. They say that God is influencing an election or God is causing a hurricane. People make extraordinary claims all the time. And so I don't think that it's a matter of the degree of the lie that can influence whether or not you should believe it. And Joseph saying that he saw God in Jesus Christ is an extraordinary claim. It's something that is not something that happens every day. It's not something that everybody goes around saying, hey, yesterday I prayed, and while I was praying, I saw a light. And then I saw two personages that appeared to me. And those two personages were God and Jesus Christ. How many people say that? Sure, it would be easy to recant that and say, just kidding, I didn't really see them. But it's still, people will say extraordinary things, and there are people who will believe it. And so I don't think this is a fair comparison so far.
He would have said, I saw God, and God and Jesus are one being, and God and Jesus are spirit.
Okay, so he was just saying that Joseph didn't say something that was in unison with the current accepted view of the Trinity at the time. So he was saying something unique. Still, I don't think that lends any more efficacy to what was being said.
That's what people wanted to hear. That's what they would have believed. And yet he didn't say that. He said God and Jesus are separate beings with physical, tangible, perfected bodies, Whoa, that is so far out of the realm of believability that Joseph Smith proves himself either a horrible liar, I mean, he was bad at it, or a speaker of truth.
You see, I think this is a false dichotomy. This is a completely false dichotomy because it's not either God and Jesus are separate beings or Joseph is telling the truth. It is Joseph could have made up something that he wanted to have that distinguished him his view of religion from other faiths. Otherwise, why not just become a Presbyterian or a Methodist or a Catholic or any one of the other religions that he was investigating at the time? It's like it would have been far easier to say, okay, I saw the same God that I've heard talked about growing up in a supposed religious home where God and Jesus were talked about, where the Bible was read, and I'm sure where the concept of the Trinity was taught. And so it would have been very easy to say that Joseph would have just gone along with that, or he would have wanted something that distinguished himself from the other religions and he was making it up, or he could have been telling the truth. Or there are any number of permutations. It's like I don't buy into this dichotomy, and I don't think anybody that's rational would buy into this dichotomy either.
Joseph Smith himself taught that true faith isn't just believing there's some God out there in the universe. True faith isn't just believing in some higher power. True faith is knowing God, knowing his attributes, what he's like, knowing his plan for us, and knowing that our lives are being lived in accordance with that plan.
Okay, again, it's coming down to that knowledge. How do you know? It's something that I have learned about in trying to dissect and further understand not just religious teachings but philosophical teachings, where there's this difference between epistemology, how we know things or how we come to learn things, and ontology, what actually is, and how we try to understand what actually is, but we have to have some way of acquiring that knowledge. And I think that the avenues for determining God and his attributes and his plan are things that are very subjective. There's not a lot of material, tangible substance that can be looked at outside of pages and words in a book, or the voices of people who are proclaiming that they've seen God or interacted with him in some way, but there's not a way for everybody to say, well, why doesn't God show himself to me so that I can have that same knowledge? That's one of the biggest questions to me is, okay, if there's a God who wants to have a relationship with me and wants me to understand his plan, why doesn't he have a better avenue of making himself known than pages, words in a book, subjective feelings, or the words of others who claim to speak for him? Why is there not a direct route to God and knowing whether or not that God exists? Being fallible human beings with limited understanding, it's like how can it's hard to even grasp what that would look like. What would it be like to see a God? And I know within religion, it's within Mormonism particularly, there is the idea that you can't see the face of God and live, except for those he translates and makes able to observe his face without being destroyed. And I don't understand why God couldn't have created his beings more substantially, that in a way that they would be able to withstand his presence. It's like if we lived with him, as Mormonism teaches, before we ever came to earth, then there was no problem there. We weren't perfect beings then. Why is it just the fact that we have a physical body that we are no longer capable of observing God's face, interacting with him, having actual conversations with an actual audible voice, as with an actual person that you can see and talk to face. It's like these are very challenging questions and things that are not satisfactory, that are not answered to set my satisfaction within religion. And so I just can't accept this and see it the way that is taught within Mormonism.
See, you want to walk away from the church? Say goodbye to your whole concept of God.
See, and that's something that is very saying goodbye to your whole concept of God. That is something I think that is very slippery, and it's very binary thinking. It's very this or that. Again, a false dichotomy. If you leave Mormonism, you don't have to completely abandon your whole concept of God. You can still believe that they are two separate beings, but that the leadership of the church is just not following God. Or maybe God is not exactly the way that it's described in Mormonism, and you have to work out for yourself what this God looks like. What does it mean to you? Do you subscribe to a Spinozan God? Do you subscribe to a pantheistic view of the universe where everything is God? There are so many options. It's like you could go to a different Christian faith. You could become a Jew. You could become a Muslim. It's like there are so many options. You don't have to buy into Mormonism or bust.
I had some kid at BYU say to me, I don't believe in Joseph Smith anymore, but I still believe in God and Jesus.
Because he can.
And I said, look, I don't mean to be rude, but do you realize how stupid you just sounded?
Wait, see, this is something that really frustrates me. Questioning the intelligence of people who have left your particular version of faith is completely dismissive. It's erudite. It makes you, it's like it's pitting you against somebody that you want to share your views. And to have this attitude, well, you're so stupid for not believing the exact way that I do. You've used your, if God is real, your God given ability to think and to reason to come to a different conclusion. There is nothing wrong with that. You are still using your reason. The justifications are subject to debate, but to just automatically dismiss somebody as stupid, it is not a it's that kind of thinking is not conducive to a healthy dialogue, a good conversation. It automatically makes you think that you're better than them. And I think that that is something that is so pervasive in our society where it's like my way or the highway. And it's just not healthy. And it's something that bothers me to a great degree because there are the human experience is so varied and no two people are alike. We all have our different experiences and everything that goes into making us who we are. We should be much more careful to be open and receptive to different experiences, different viewpoints, different ways of getting to different conclusions, and being willing to say, I don't know everything. And maybe you know something or have experienced something that can influence the way I experience life. And we can both be better. It's like, how much different would it be where we discuss things in a way that's not saying, well, you're stupid for not agreeing with me, but let's see where we can agree and see if our reasoning is the same. Going back to that epistemology, it's like, what tools did you use to get there? Well, here's the tool that I use to get to where I am, and let's see if we can come to some form of agreement rather than this dismissive behavior and castigating each other as stupid just for not believing the exact same.
He's like, what? I said,
This hurts. It really hurts.
you don't believe in Joseph Smith, but you still believe in God and Jesus. You separated them. Who taught you to do that?
Isn't this the whole point of a university, to teach how to think, how to be rational, how to stand on your own 2 feet and not just accept everything that you've been fed your whole life. It's like, why are you, an educator, dismissing somebody's arrival at a conclusion that's different than yours?
Who taught you that they're separate beings? Joseph Smith. So don't tell me you don't believe in Joseph Smith anymore when your whole concept of God, your whole covenant relationship with him is thanks to Joseph Smith.
And nobody else could have possibly thought that God and Jesus are separate. Nobody else could have thought, oh, there's Zeus, there's Helena, there's Apollo. There are different gods that are separate. Oh, that's a new concept. No, I'm sorry. Joseph Smith wasn't the first person to ever think that there could be separate personages, separate gods. He may have individualized it and brought and used it for Mormonism, but I don't think the mere fact that he mainstreamed it in his theology is an exclusive claim to say that nobody else could have possibly thought of this.
My son served a mission in Japan. And I said to him, wow, that must have been really interesting to teach people who don't have a Christian background. He says, oh, yeah, it was, because they don't know the Bible stories. They don't celebrate Christmas. They don't celebrate Easter.
Yeah, and that's a whole different perspective. It's like the outsider test of faith. It's like these people believe in their religion, I'm sure, just as fervently as Mormons believe in their religion. How do they come to their own versions of deity and their own, how did they receive their own revelations, etc.? It's like they couldn't have had their own experiences to come to these at all. No, I don't think so.
I said, how on earth did you get them to join the church? He said they read the Book of Mormon. And then when they gained a testimony that Joseph Smith was a prophet, then they believed any being who happened to come to Joseph Smith. And we know that that being was Jesus Christ. You hear
It was Jesus Christ, or it was God and Jesus Christ?
people say, I believe in Jesus, but I don't believe in Joseph Smith. But there are people in Japan who say, the only reason I believe in Jesus is because of Joseph Smith.
And again, is that exclusive? Are the only people in Japan who believe in Jesus also those who believe in Jesus Christ? Or are there missionaries from other faiths? Are there not Catholics in Japan? Or are there not other religions in Japan? I very much doubt that Mormonism is the only Christian faith in Japan.
What do you get here that you don't get anywhere else? A knowledge of God and
a belief in God, perhaps distinctly, but there are factions of Mormonism who also believe in God and Jesus who aren't mainstream Church of Jesus Christ. There are fundamentalist LDS. I forget the exact names. There are splinter groups off of Mormonism who still believe in Joseph Smith, who still believe in God and Jesus as separate beings.
covenant relationship with him that suddenly allows this higher power to have power in your life. And I don't want to walk away from that. I don't want to say goodbye to that.
See, and I think that's something that, again, I think is kind of, it feels kind of culty, where it's like, it's all or nothing. You are either inside or you're outside. You're with us or you're against us. It's like that very binary thinking, I think, is something that's very harmful to a lot of people. And it keeps them in the faith for the wrong it may keep them in the church for the wrong reasons, and those who leave it are looked at differently and are looked at as less than because they choose to walk a different path. You can maintain if you want to believe in God and Jesus as separate beings without believing in Joseph Smith, you have that freedom. If you want to say that I no longer believe in any God whatsoever, you have that right just as much. Decide who God is for yourself. Decide how you want to believe in that God and the way you think that God should live how that God would have you live your life on your own terms. You don't have to put it in the hands of people in suits and ties sitting on talking from a pulpit. You can have that relationship on your own with whatever deity, whatever form of God you want. You don't have to accept Mormonism or bust.
G stands for Godhead.
Okay, so parting thoughts, I think, besides what I already said, just again emphasizing that point that you don't have to be either 100% in or not at all. You have every right to decide where on that spectrum you fall, whether it's believing in God and Jesus as separate, believing in God and Jesus as a trinity, believing in God and Jesus as whatever you decide. That's your prerogative. As a human being, you have the right to decide what you believe. Don't take it on anybody else's word. Figure it out for yourself. Understand that as a human being, you have that right, that perhaps even responsibility to decide your own beliefs. You don't have to take anybody else's word for it. You can be your own person. And so I just want to say thank you for listening to me, allowing me a chance to have a voice. And I'll most likely be coming out with the next part of this sometime within the next week. And I hope to see you then.